Welcome to Vital Signs and Verdicts, where medicine meets the law and the truth gets put under the microscope. I'm Liam, a former hospital administrator turned whistleblower, and your host. I'm joined by Hope, a former surgical RN who lived through her own systemic failure. Pete, who holds a doctorate in psychology and helps firms pick juries for high-profile cases. And Dr. Tyler, a medical doctor with a Juris Doctorate who has testified in federal court and before Congress. And today we have a very special episode with a very important guest, Natasha, the plaintiff in the Richardson Edmonds versus Cox Health and Cox Medical Center Branson. She has stepped forward not just for herself, but for every family who has ever been told to just accept what happened. Natasha, thank you for being here.
Thank you. And please just call me Tasha. And thank you so much for having me. I'm here because families deserve the truth and because silence only protects the people who already have power.
Before we open the phone lines, I want to give you space to ground us. For listeners who may be hearing your story for the first time, what is the core issue at the heart of your case?
The core issue is that my husband was over-medicated, given vaccines against his will, tied down, flooded with over 60 different major medications. He didn't receive the care he needed, and the records that should have explained what happened don't match the reality we lived. When a hospital's documentation contradicts itself, when timelines shift, when critical information disappears, families are left with grief and questions, and no accountability.
As someone who worked inside the system, I want to say this plainly. When records don't line up, that's not a clerical error. That's a signal. And patients rarely have the tools to challenge it.
And from a legal medical standpoint, the moment litigation is reasonably anticipated, preservation of records is not optional. It's a duty.
One thing that stands out is your composure. Most plaintiffs are overwhelmed. You're organized, factual, and you've built a timeline that frankly rivals what expert witnesses produce. How did you get to that point?
I made my husband a promise before he died. It has been a hard run, no available attorneys to take the case, medical records changing every time I looked. But when you make a promise like that, when you lose someone you love, you either collapse or you build. I built. I documented everything because I knew no one else would, and I realized quickly that if I didn't create a record, the system would create one for me, and it wouldn't reflect the truth.
And that's why your case resonates. You're not just reacting, you're leading. All right, phone lines are open. If you have a question for Tasha or the panel, call in. First up, we have Marcy from Springfield.
First, I'm so sorry for your loss. My question is, how did you know something was wrong with the records? Most of us wouldn't even know where to start.
I didn't start by assuming wrongdoing. I started by asking for clarity. But when the same event was documented 3 different ways, when timestamps contradicted each other, and when the hospital couldn't explain the discrepancies, that's when I knew I wasn't imagining things.
That's exactly how nurses catch internal issues too. Patterns don't lie.
Tom, you are on the air with Vital Signs and Verdicts. Go ahead.
I'm not trying to be rude, but hospitals are busy. Isn't it possible these were just mistakes? Why assume something more serious?
That's a fair question, and if it were one mistake or even 2, I might agree. But when the inconsistencies all conveniently reduce the hospital's responsibility, when key data is missing only in the moments that matter, and when the hospital refuses to explain the contradictions, that's not random, that's a pattern.
And for me, that pattern started on day 1. The first red flag was a nurse divulging private medical information to my daughter and her boyfriend, people who were not authorized. When I found out, I went straight to the hospital. They put me in a conference room and told me my husband was alert and coherent. When he supposedly gave permission for that disclosure, I knew instantly that was a lie. He wasn't alert. He wasn't coherent. And I remember thinking, why are they lying to me about something so basic? When I got home, I checked his online portal. That same day, the hospital psychologist had placed him on a medical hold, documented that he was not competent, and never told me. That alone contradicted everything they had just said. Then I looked at the medication list. What the nurses told me he was on didn't match what was in the portal, and neither matched what was written on the whiteboard in his CCU room. My roommate and I sat down and started going through every record line by line, and the deeper we looked, the worse it got.
The case file lays it out clearly. He was administered approximately 60 distinct medications, many contraindicated, unnecessary, or given without informed consent.
We repeatedly asked staff to stop unnecessary medications. Those requests were ignored.
On November 5th, he was dropped from a gurney, fracturing his wrist. The VA confirmed the fracture after discharge. The hospital never documented it.
Restraints were applied without a valid order or consent. On November 8th, they gave him a flu vaccine without checking his status or obtaining consent.
He was discharged on November 10th, and his condition deteriorated. Bed sores, organ decline, until he died on March 4th.
Before he died, both he and I repeatedly requested complete medication records and internal review findings. Cox Health never produced them.
And the lies didn't stop.
They told me they did an internal review and found nothing wrong. They told me I needed a court order to access my husband's own medical records. They lied about the flu vaccine. They lied about him being alert. They couldn't explain why he was on paralytics after he was no longer intubated. They couldn't explain why he was on 6 different broad-spectrum antibiotics with no signs of infection. Every time I asked a question, I got stonewalled, then ignored, then bullied. Eventually, I was told they had completed their investigation, and I was to never contact them again. And then the portal started changing. Printouts I had from earlier didn't match what I was seeing later. That's when I posted a simple message on Facebook. My husband deserved better. Within hours, I received an email from a Cox executive saying they were aware of my online presence and that I should be careful, or I might be facing defamation. That was the moment I realized they weren't just avoiding accountability, they were trying to intimidate me into silence. So I did the opposite. I wrote 2 books, one in the top 10 and the other made it to number 2. I wrote a song that received over 30,000 listens before YouTube pulled it down. It's finally back up. I started speaking publicly, and people started responding. What began as a petition with 30 signatures, already more than I expected, grew into over 700 stories from people who had been lied to, dismissed, over-medicated, or ignored.
This isn't one mistake. It's a system. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it.
That's exactly the kind of pattern jurors pay attention to. Not because it's emotional, but because it's consistent.
And from inside the system, I can tell you, when documentation shifts after questions are asked, that's not normal. That's not clerical, that's defensive.
And when a hospital warns a grieving spouse about defamation instead of answering basic questions, that speaks volumes about institutional priorities.
Thank you for laying that out with such clarity. It's one thing to allege a pattern. It's another to walk listeners through the exact moments where that pattern revealed itself.
And to add context, in federal cases, patterns of documentation irregularities are often treated as indicators of systemic issues, not isolated errors.
Jurors don't expect perfection, but they do expect honesty. When honesty is missing, they notice.
Well, and they should expect close to perfection. This is people's lives, and they are all held to a higher standard.
We have Angela from Taneyville.
Thank you for speaking out. My father died in a hospital, and we also found inconsistencies. What advice do you have for families who feel something is wrong but don't know how to push back?
Document everything. Dates, names, conversations, request records early. And don't let anyone make you feel like you're being difficult. You're advocating for someone who can't speak for themselves.
And Angela, you're not alone. These stories are more common than people realize.
One thing that stands out is your refusal to let the system intimidate you. What has been the hardest part of this journey?
The hardest part is knowing that if I hadn't fought, my husband's story would have been buried under paperwork. The system counts on families being overwhelmed. I refuse to let that happen.
And that resolve is exactly what juries respond to. Not anger, clarity.
Your case raises a bigger question. What happens when hospitals treat documentation as a shield instead of a tool for patient safety? Phone lines are still open. Next up, we've got Rick from Kimberling City. Rick, you're on Vital Signs and Verdicts.
Yeah, I've been listening. And honestly, this sounds like someone who just can't accept that hospitals aren't perfect. People die. It happens. And all these claims, 60 medications, dropped from a gurney, vaccines, restraints, come on. If it was that bad, why didn't you do something sooner? Why didn't you stop it? Sounds like you're just blaming the hospital because you're grieving.
All right, Rick, I'm going to stop you right there.
No, Liam, it's okay. I want to answer him. You asked why I didn't do something sooner. I did. I was at the hospital every day. I asked questions every day, and every time I asked, I got a different answer. When I asked why my husband was suddenly on medications he'd never taken before, I was told, that's not accurate. When I asked why the whiteboard didn't match the chart, I was told it's just a mistake. When I asked why he was on paralytics after he was no longer intubated, no one could explain it. You asked why I didn't stop it. I tried. Repeatedly, and I was ignored. You questioned the 60 medications. That number isn't mine. It's in the case file. It's in their own documentation, and you asked why I didn't act sooner. I did. I asked for the records. I asked for the internal review. I asked for explanations. And instead of answers, I was told I needed a court order. I was told they found nothing wrong. I was told to never contact them again. And when I posted one sentence, my husband deserved better, I received an email warning me about defamation. That's not grief talking. That's a system trying to silence a widow. And Rick, you're right about one thing. People do die in hospitals. But they don't die from being dropped off a gurney. They don't die from being restrained without orders. They don't die from being given a flu vaccine without consent. They don't die from being put on 6 broad-spectrum antibiotics with no infection. They don't die from bed sores that never should have happened. They die when the system stops seeing them as human.
Okay, I didn't know all that. I came in too hot. I'm sorry for your loss. And thank you for explaining it without biting my head off. I get it now.
Thank you, Rick. I'm not here to fight anyone. I'm here because families deserve the truth, even when it's uncomfortable.
And that right there is why Tasha is sitting at this table. Grace under pressure, facts over emotion, and the ability to turn a confrontation into clarity. We're going to shift into something that has shaken a lot of people in this region. The Epic system migration that Cox Health launched on March 1st. Right in the middle of active litigation, and after a federal judge explicitly ordered the preservation of all records. You were one of the first people to raise the alarm publicly. Walk us through what happened.
When the migration was announced on KY3, it stopped me cold, because I knew what was in my case file, and I knew what the federal judge had said. Preserve the records. Do not alter them. Do not destroy them. Do not touch anything, except to protect it. And instead of protecting the records, they initiated a full-scale migration to Epic, one of the most complex, failure-prone transitions in healthcare. Anyone who has ever worked in a hospital knows that migrations are where data gets lost, corrupted, overwritten, or mismapped. Audit trails break, timestamps shift, entire fields disappear, and that's in the best-case scenario. So when I saw that announcement, I realized they went against the judge's order. They touched the system anyway.
For listeners who don't work in healthcare, let me say this plainly. Migrating to Epic is not like updating your phone. It's a massive, high-risk overhaul. Every nurse, every doctor, every administrator knows that data loss is a real possibility.
And from a legal standpoint, once litigation is active, any action that risks altering or destroying evidence, especially electronic medical records, is extremely serious. Courts expect institutions to freeze systems, not migrate them.
Jurors don't need to understand the technical details. They understand timing, and the timing here is striking.
The reason the migration matters is because of what was already happening in my case. I had already documented that the portal printouts were changing. I had already been told different stories by different staff. I had already seen contradictions in medications, timestamps, and notes. And I had already been stonewalled when I asked for the full medication records and internal review findings. So when they launched the Epic migration, it wasn't happening in a vacuum. It was happening after they told me my husband was alert and coherent when he wasn't. They hid the psychologist's medical hold that said he was not competent. They administered around 60 medications, many contraindicated or unnecessary. They dropped him from a gurney and never documented the fracture. They used restraints without a valid order. They gave him a flu vaccine without consent. They refused to give me his records without a court order. They warned me about defamation when I posted that my husband deserved better. And the portal started changing after I asked questions. So when they said, we're switching to Epic, all I could think was, how much more of the truth is going to disappear?
And that's not paranoia. That's pattern recognition. Let's take a call. We have Brian from Ozark.
I work in IT, not healthcare. But even I know you don't migrate a system during litigation. Why would they do that?
That's the question everyone is asking. And no one from Cox has given an answer. Not to me, not to the public, not to the court.
In my experience, when a hospital chooses to migrate during litigation, it's either because they underestimated the legal implications or because they prioritize the migration over the legal duty to preserve evidence. Neither explanation is good.
Next caller, Jenna from Branson.
I'm not defending the hospital, but don't they have backups? Wouldn't that protect the records?
Backups don't solve the problem. Backups only preserve what the system thinks is there. If data was already missing, altered, mislabeled, or inconsistent before the migration, the backup preserves the inconsistencies, not the truth.
And during a migration, data can be mapped incorrectly, dropped, overwritten, reformatted, stripped of metadata, or lose the audit trail that shows who did what and when.
So yes, they have backups, but backups don't protect families from a broken system. They protect the system from accountability. And jurors understand that. We had backups is not the reassurance hospitals think it is.
All right, we've got another caller on the line. This is Stephanie from Springfield. Stephanie, you're on Vital Signs and Verdicts.
Hi. So, I work in healthcare, and I just have to say, a lot of what your guest is describing sounds like she just doesn't understand how hospitals work. Medications change constantly, documentation isn't perfect, and families misinterpret things all the time. Honestly, it sounds like she's reading way too much into normal hospital operations and paralytics after extubation. That doesn't even make sense medically, so I doubt that's accurate. Maybe she's confused.
Okay, Stephanie, I'm going to...
Liam, it's all right. Stephanie, thank you for calling in, and thank you for working in healthcare, truly. I know how hard that job is, and I know most people in the system are doing their best with impossible workloads. And let me clarify something here. I am suing the hospital, the administration, not any one doctor or nurse as of now. And now let me respond to what you said. You're right that medications change. You're right that documentation isn't perfect. And you're right that families can misunderstand things. But here's what I didn't misunderstand. A psychologist placing my husband on a medical hold and documenting that he was not competent, while a nurse told me he was alert and coherent and gave permission for disclosures he could not legally give. Conflicting medication lists between the portal, the whiteboard, and the nurse's verbal reports. 6 broad-spectrum antibiotics with no documented infection. Paralytics charted after extubation, something every clinician I've spoken to has said is inappropriate without a very specific documented reason. A fractured wrist confirmed by the VA that the hospital never documented. Restraints applied without a valid order. A flu vaccine administered without consent. Being told I needed a court order to access my husband's records. Being told to never contact them again. And receiving a defamation warning for saying my husband deserved better. Those aren't misunderstandings. Those are documented facts. And Stephanie, I want to say this gently. When families raise concerns, the worst thing the system can do is assume they're confused. Because sometimes the family is the only one paying close enough attention to see the pattern.
Okay, I didn't realize all of that was documented. I guess I reacted because I see families get overwhelmed and lash out, and I thought that's what this was, but hearing the details, that's not normal, and I'm sorry you went through that.
Thank you, Stephanie. I know the system puts impossible pressure on staff. My issue isn't with the people doing the work. It's with the culture that hides mistakes instead of fixing them.
As a former RN, I want to say this. Families like Kasha's are the ones who keep the system honest. And the system should be thanking her, not threatening her.
And once again, Tasha turns a confrontation into clarity. That's what accountability sounds like.
We've got another caller on the line. This is Linda from Forsyth. Linda, you're on Vital Signs and Verdicts.
Yeah, I've been listening to these last couple of callers, and I'm sorry, but I can't sit here and listen to people question this woman like she's making things up. Because my mom died in that same hospital. She choked to death. Choked. Because nobody checked her airway before slapping a BiPAP mask on her face. She was gasping, clawing at the mask, and they treated her like she was being dramatic. Like she was some hysterical old woman. She died 3 days later. So do the people calling in acting like this is all normal hospital stuff? No. No, it's not. And I'm sick of it.
Linda, thank you for calling, and thank you for trusting us with that. I can hear how much pain is still in your voice, and you have every right to be angry.
What happened to your mother wasn't dramatic, it wasn't normal, it wasn't just how hospitals work.
A patient struggling to breathe should never be dismissed. A BiPAP should never be placed on someone whose airway hasn't been checked, and no family should have to watch their loved one fight for air while staff assume it's behavioral.
You're not overreacting. You're not imagining things. You're not alone.
They made me feel crazy. They made me feel like I was the problem. And listening to you tonight, it's the first time I've heard someone say out loud what I've been screaming in my head for 2 years.
That's why I'm here. Because families like yours and mine were made to feel like we were the issue. Like our grief made us unreliable. Like our questions were disrespectful. But the truth is, families see what's happening. Families know when something is wrong. Families are the last line of defense when the system stops listening. And Linda, your mother deserved better. Just like my husband did, just like so many others did.
Thank you. I didn't expect to cry on the radio. I'm tired of being angry alone.
You're not alone anymore.
Linda, as a former RN, I want to say this. What you described is a failure of basic airway assessment. That is not normal. That is not acceptable. And your anger is justified.
And from a psychological standpoint, when institutions dismiss families, it compounds trauma. Hearing you speak tonight is powerful and important.
Linda, thank you for calling, and it adds to a pattern we're hearing from hundreds of families. We have time for one more caller, Sandra from Nixa.
I've been following your story. Do you think the migration was intentional?
I can't speak to intent. What I can speak to is impact.
Let's be clear though, Tasha, the migration happened after a federal judge ordered preservation, after you documented inconsistencies.
After I requested records, they refused to produce, after the portal started changing, after they threatened me over Facebook, and after my petition grew from 30 stories to over 700. So whether it was intentional or reckless, the result is the same. The truth is harder to find now than it was before March 1st.
And that's why this conversation matters, because families deserve better than disappearing data. Before we close, what do you want listeners, especially those who've never dealt with a medical crisis, to take away from your story?
That transparency isn't optional, that families deserve answers, and that when something feels wrong, you're allowed to say so. Even if the people in the room have degrees, titles, and power.
You're giving voice to what so many families feel but can't articulate.
And that's why this conversation matters. Tasha, thank you for your courage, your clarity, and your willingness to speak publicly. Your case isn't just about what happened. It's about what must change.
Your willingness to speak publicly about this, calmly, factually, and with documentation, has changed the conversation in this region. The epic migration isn't just a technical event. It's a moment that raises real questions about transparency, accountability, and the duty to preserve evidence.
And those questions aren't going away. Find out more or follow this case on the website www.wematter.live. This has been Vital Signs and Verdicts. Until next time, stay informed, stay empowered, and never stop asking questions.